injured early in the morning.
Well, you remember when the bomb went off in the basement of it in 1993, how much damage was done throughout that building, how much chaos there was at that time. These are two coordinated airplane attacks on the building on the upper reaches of it. That will have an enormous structural effect. Those buildings, I think that it's fair to say, will probably have to be brought down. It's too early to speculate on that, but there's been that kind of damage.
Let's talk again. You were talking about
have somebody actually.
This is a reporter here in New York from WNBC. You talk about the fact this plane was taken from Boston on the way to Los Angeles. The reports are that it was being diverted to JFK. And just for people who aren't familiar with the geography of this area, the southern tip of Manhattan would be very much near the landing pattern for JFK Airport. It could have been easy for a hijacker to pretend that he was taking that plane to JFK and veer off at the last minute.
Yeah, I heard one eyewitness say that over Washington Square, which is in the lower reaches of Manhattan, he saw a plane go over at about 1,000 feet, apparently the American Airlines flight, and then do what he described as a sharp right turn right toward the World Trade Center. He then lost sight of it.
And one eyewitness here in this AP report says he was getting off a PATH train to the World Trade Center and saw bodies falling out of the building. As he approached it, police told him to get out of the building immediately. He ran outside and watched people jump out of the first building, and then there was a second explosion.
This footage we're seeing right now shows that the damage is so severe. I mean, we had seen what seemed to be two fairly self-contained impact craters before, and now it appears something much more dramatic has happened to at least one of those towers.
These pictures are beyond belief.
We have a report that the second plane may have flown out of Newark, New Jersey. This is an official who was speaking on the condition of anonymity. Again, there is no confirmation of that. We just know that there were two planes that went in. The first one apparently was an American Airlines flight that was from Boston to Los Angeles. We're now seeing it from the harbor view of this continuing damage and destruction to the World Trade Center.
Incidentally, Tom, I just want to interrupt you for 2 seconds because apparently Jamie Gangel has some more information for us. Jamie?
Spoken again to U.S. officials with access to the highest intelligence, and they are now confirming that it does appear that at the Pentagon it was a plane. Again, they are saying they believe now a third plane was involved at the Pentagon.
And of course, this has been the nightmare, Katie, for national security officials for a long time. We talk about nuclear bombs and those kinds of exchanges or invasions, but everyone has been terribly worried about the suitcase-sized bomb of some kind or an airplane or an attack on our subways in the large cities. And this, obviously, no one had anticipated. 3 airplanes that were deliberately aimed at critical targets in America. We can only hope that it's over for today, but officials are taking no chances on all that. They're evacuating all critical buildings because, as Mr. Johnson said earlier, this is an open society. James Kallstrom from the FBI also pointing out that almost anyone can come in here. They have access to so many instruments that can be used as instruments of attack and terrorism, and that certainly has been the case today.
Let's go to our State Department correspondent, Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, what can you tell us?
Well, this from the FBI. The State Department has been evacuated. There was a meeting going on in the Operations Center. Other top officials were in the Situation Room at the White House. Colin Powell is in Bogota, Colombia, on a 2-day trip. But this very interesting information, Katie, Matt, and Tom, from the FBI, they had been operating a massive exercise from their hostage rescue unit. All of their top teams, about 50 personnel, helicopters, equipment, were in Monterey, California for the last 2 days, scheduled to fly back today commercially. So all of those people are out of place. It's fair to say, according to sources that we've talked to here at NBC, that the FBI rescue operations and other FBI operations are really in chaos right now because they can't reach their officials in New York. All of their phone lines are down, and now you've got all of their special experts on this stuck in Monterey, California, trying to get a military flight back because there are no longer commercial flights. So they are seriously out of pocket, and there is a real breakdown of the FBI anti-terror coordination team, which is, of course, the principal team that would lead any effort and was so effective under Jim Kallstrom in New York City during the World Trade Center bombing and the TWA explosion, which of course turned out not to be terror.
Andrea, is the State Department taking this claim of responsibility from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine seriously? Are they giving any credence to that, or are they dismissing it, or how do they feel about who might have been responsible for this?
I think it is far too early for them, even the best experts in the government, to figure this out. They have one instant reaction, as you know, and it could be wrong, but their immediate reaction in a case like this would be to look toward Osama bin Laden and the collateral groups connected to him, simply because he has proved with the embassy bombings in Africa that he is the one terror leader who is capable of this kind of highly coordinated attack. The bombings went off in Tanzania and in Kenya almost simultaneously. It was extraordinarily well coordinated. They proved their case to a jury effectively and have managed to develop a great deal of information from sources from, in fact, turning some former members of his network.
Andrea?
So they believe, Tom, that he is the most likely person, but it's far too early to say anything.
We want to tell you that American Airlines has confirmed that one of its flights, American Airlines Flight number 11 from Boston's Logan Airport, scheduled to go to LAX. It left at 8 a.m. this morning. 45 minutes later, it was diverted into the World Trade Center. It was the airline that was involved. We can only assume on a popular flight like that it probably had a capacity load of passengers and crew on board. There was a hijacking. That was the first plane that was involved. We don't know about the second plane yet, nor do we know the origins of a third plane that deliberately flew itself into the Pentagon this morning near the heliport. NBC Jim Miklashevsky now has been forced to evacuate that building, and so we'll have to wait till we hear from him.
Saw some pretty dramatic pictures from the Pentagon just moments ago, Matt.
Let's go back to a few seconds ago. This is now about an hour after the first impact. We saw some dramatic footage of a portion of one of the Twin Towers, actually it appearing to fall away from the rest of the building. Can we go to the tape now? Here we go, right here. This is, I mean, when you look at it, the building has collapsed. That tower just came down.
Let's go to Bob Bazell, who is at St. Vincent's Hospital. Bob, what's going on there? What can you tell us?
Katie, St. Vincent's Hospital is one of the hospitals that's closest to the World Trade Center. In the last few minutes, ambulances have been coming in one right after another. Most of the people they're bringing in have second and third degree burns, very serious burn victims. They say the smoke inhalation people will probably be the most serious, but they're not even close to getting to them yet. There's a triage operation that's going on in the area. Ambulances are being dispatched to every hospital in New York City. The entire staff of this hospital has come in from wherever they are, and it's true at hospitals across New York City. They're standing there. As soon as an ambulance pulls in, dozens of medical workers rush up to it. But it's a carnage that's just beginning. Everybody here, the emergency service workers I spoke to who have been down into the World Trade Center site, say this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be massive amounts of casualties.
Bob, what are they telling you about people? Were there many people inside the building, or is it just too early to tell where the people were?
Well, there were certainly, probably hundreds, even thousands of people in the building, even though it was before 9 o'clock on the start of the usual work period, because it's just such a large area. So the number of casualties is just enormous, and they're just beginning to sort it out and just starting to get to the first few that they can get to. But the ambulances are just coming in. They're lined up. Every ambulance in New York City has been summoned. They're standing in a queue. They go in as soon as they can get a victim and bring them up here right away.
Bob, we're also looking at the lower end of Manhattan now as a result of the collapse of one World Trade Center. That whole financial district is now engulfed in smoke and debris, and there probably is going to be a lot more smoke inhalation problems as a result of what's
almost certainly, Tom. I was actually standing and saw that collapse, and everybody here just gasped, and even the medical workers and the ambulance attendants, when they saw that people who are used to tragedy grabbed each other and hugged each other, and some started to cry.
And of course, one wonders about the triage unit.
Exactly, we're close to the base of that building trying to evacuate people. And when a building of that size falls, it does not fall on its own footprint.
No, absolutely. I'm several blocks north of there, so I don't know what that area looks like, but one can only imagine.
Well, the consequences go on, not just to the World Trade Center and to the poor people who were trapped and caught there, but of course that is the heart of the world financial markets, which have now been shut down effectively as well. So the ripple effect continues this morning as we all try to adjust psychologically and intellectually to what we are witnessing here. It is difficult to comprehend, but this country, the strongest country in the world, has been the target of a major coordinated terrorist attack, and the end is not over yet, even if it's confined to just these three targets. the ripple effect goes on. All air traffic has been shut down. There will be no financial markets in place today. Business has been stopped across the country.
And of course, who knows the human toll that will be the result of this action. Matt actually just pointed out to me on any given day, 50,000 people, Tom, work at the World Trade Center.
And at 8:45 in the morning, if they're not in the building, they're around the building. That's a beehive of activity down there. There is no more active area in terms of pedestrian traffic.
I hate to keep going back to the collapse of that tower, but if you consider that this plane hit at mid-structure, and that would have probably taken out the electrical in the building where elevators wouldn't work and people struggling to get some way out of that tower, and it takes a long time to come down over 100 stories, and to think about the possible loss of life that just occurred by the collapse of that southeastern tower is just amazing. Minna Kathuria is with the Today Show, and she apparently saw the collapse of one of those towers. Minna?
Yes, hi, Matt.
Tell me what you saw.
We're on the corner of Duane and West Broadway, walking down towards the Twin Towers, and it just collapsed. It looks like it looks sort of like the building just demolished. Smoke, clouds, clouds of smoke everywhere. People running towards me. I was going towards the Twin Towers. People were going away from the towers, and it was just people running like I've never seen a scene like it.
Have you, from where you were, Minna, did you see many of the injured being treated? Is there any indication as the type of perimeter that the EMS people were dealing with?
No, I hadn't gotten that close yet. They were sort of blocking off the street. Now what they're doing is totally clearing out the area. And more emergency officials are coming in to help.
Can you just give me an idea of the reaction of people down there, Minna? Just pedestrians?
Everyone in tears. People who were. I've met some woman who was in the building to the right of where the first thing happened, and just all crying, wondering if the people that they know in the buildings next door are okay.
Jamie, Minna, thank you very much. Minna, take care of yourself. Jamie Gangel, our national correspondent, is on the phone now with some more information. Jamie?
Katie, as you well know, buildings around town are being evacuated. The State Department has been evacuated. The White House has been evacuated. And the Pentagon has been evacuated. Intelligence officials tell me that they do believe at the Pentagon that was a third plane going down. They have had, the intelligence sources that I've talked to say that they have not received any claim of responsibility yet.
Jamie, have you gotten any information from Reagan National Airport as to air traffic in the area this morning, or anybody who might have somehow traced this plane or figured out from where it came or where it was going?
They still do not have any of those details yet. It is almost impossible. They were confused for a long time as to whether it's a bomb or a plane. They say now that it appears to be a plane, but they say that is all the information that they have. As you know, the FAA has shut down all aircraft now, and they are now going back and trying to sort that out. But they do not have any information on that yet.
Do they know what type of plane it might have been?
There is no, unfortunately, they just don't have that yet.
All right, Jamie. Thank you very much, Jamie. We'll be talking with you.
It goes without saying this is the most serious attack in the United States in more than 100 years. Not since the War of 1812, and certainly the damage that we did to ourselves during the Civil War has this country suffered this kind of damage within its interior. Obviously, Pearl Harbor, which triggered World War II, was a horrific event as well, but there has never been an event to match the magnitude of this one, in which everything has been shut down in terms of air traffic. The national capital has been immobilized. The White House, State Department, Pentagon has been attacked. The financial markets have been shut down. There's an untold loss of life here in Manhattan, the nerve center of America, to say nothing of what's going on at the Pentagon.
When's the last time? I mean, this is a shot of New York City and downtown Manhattan that many people can't remember.
It looks
like one tower.
It looks like a movie, frankly, that this is unfolding, and it combines the horror of the TWA Flight 800 bombing and the Murrah Federal Building. because it's both of these incidents, of course, coming together in the most horrific way.
By now, I would guess that everyone is up across all the time zones in America. It's 7:15 in the West, obviously, but for those of you who are just joining us at 8:45 Eastern Time, 8:42 Eastern Time today, an American Airlines flight 11 from Boston to LAX was crashed into one of the World Trade Center buildings. 15 minutes later, another plane hit the other one. That building has now collapsed. Within an hour of those two attacks, the Pentagon was hit, now we're told, by a plane, an untold number of casualties there. President Bush has been on the air. He was in Florida at the time saying apparently this was a terrorist attack. Everyone now believes that, carefully coordinated from the air. And the consequences of it in terms of human loss and the effect on this country are still to be determined.
We're going to break away briefly from our national coverage in New York to bring you news from here in Washington on these events.
As you can see, Megan McGrath is live at the Pentagon from Columbia Pike, very near the Pentagon. Megan, what can you tell us about the latest happening there?
Joe, I can't hear you. I'm assuming that you can hear and see me at this point. We are on Columbia Pike. If you take a look behind my shoulder, you can see the south side of the Pentagon. Actually, just moments before this happened, after the World Trade Center incident, we were headed from a different location to National Airport. We were on 395 when all of a sudden we heard a boom and we saw this huge fireball rise from the Pentagon. We knew immediately that something terribly wrong had happened, and we made our way to this location. We originally pulled up, there's a gas station nearby, had a really good view of the south side of the Pentagon. Smoke, flames, it was just a real mess, very, very shocking. And of course, people were running around. The Navy Annex is located nearby. There was all kinds of smoke in the area. People were very, very confused. There was a construction crew nearby. They didn't understand what happened, and people were just running toward the scene, trying to see if they could be of any assistance, trying to figure out what happened. Now, I have an eyewitness here.
Is a very high priority of this hospital. And the staff have been doing a heroic job in terms of responding.
This morning when she saw what happened, can you tell me, you say that you saw a plane actually strike the side of the Pentagon. Tell me exactly what you saw.
I saw a plane going down, big plane, commercial liner type, going down full speed and just inside the side of the Pentagon. Obviously, it was going in the Pentagon purposely. And we were driving down Columbia Pike, and it just flew right over us, as I said, full speed. And I told my husband, it's going in the Pentagon, it's going in the Pentagon. And then we heard the huge crash, saw this fireball and flame and smoke. And
so you actually saw the plane impact the side of the building?
Yes, I did.
Just one plane?
Just one plane.
Tell me a little bit about the size of the plane. Did you see any commercial markings, any markings at all on the plane?
I didn't see any marking because it was, we just saw the underneath portion of it. So, and it just, as I said, was going full speed. So we didn't have time really to see anything. Plus with the trees, you know, maybe if I could have looked at it longer, maybe I would have seen something. But with the trees there, the trees line, we didn't see any type of marking. But it was a big plane, maybe 737. My husband said 747, but I'm not positive. I don't know for sure. But it was big. Definitely the kind of plane you get on when you want to fly to LA or wherever.
Now, we've been here probably about the same length of time as you have. I have heard a total of 3 booms, that initial boom, and then I heard 3 less large booms, but booms nonetheless. Have you heard the same thing?
Yes, I did. Smaller explosions. Maybe it's inside the building, some gas lines exploding or something. I don't know. But we heard the other explosions. I don't see any other smoke anywhere, so I suppose it's from inside the building.
Okay, Isabel James, thank you very much for joining us. So there is a certain amount of chaos. From what we can kind of gather from here, it looks like they have let everybody out of the Navy Annex. There are just a lot of people wandering in the parking lot, and as you can see over there, a lot of them sitting up on the ridge and just watching as emergency crews arrive on the scene and do their job. And of course, everybody is trying to piece together exactly what happened. I mean, this was very unexpected. I can just give our example. We were just driving by, just happened to be in the same location as the Pentagon, when all of a sudden there was this big boom. It was quite sudden. It was quite loud. There was a fireball. We couldn't actually see the Pentagon itself when the explosion occurred because we were up on the highway. We saw the cloud of smoke and the fireball rise above the freeway, and we knew what direction it was coming from. We knew it was in the vicinity of the Pentagon, and that's when we arrived here on the scene. Should say that as soon as we got here, there were flames again on the south side of the Pentagon, and a short time later, I would say, we heard, and these are approximate times, we heard roughly 10 minutes later a smaller explosion. Didn't see anything unusual. The building was already on fire and was already smoking, so I don't know whether it was perhaps a gas line inside the building or something else entirely. But we have, since the initial explosion, have heard two smaller explosions, but we just don't have the information about what exactly happened there. But you just heard from the eyewitness. In fact, she's the second person that I have talked to who says that they saw a plane actually slam into the side of the Pentagon. And of course, in light of what happened in New York this morning, certainly is an interesting turn of events. But in terms of the rescue effort, we have been seeing emergency personnel arriving on the scene ever since this happened. You can see there appears to be, I don't know, John, can you see there's a military some military personnel up here on the ridge. This ridge right here, a lot of people have been coming out of the annex, and a lot of cars have been stopping on the highway, and people have been getting out of their cars, and they've been up on this ridge because you get a pretty good view of what's going on. And you can see that the military personnel are now telling them to get off the ridge, and they're going to be clearing out the area. We're going to try to stay here to keep you on top of what's going on and what we can see from our vantage point, but we'll have to wait and see what the military tells us to do. Back to you all.
Okay, thanks very much, Megan. And I want to give you this Apparently, a portion of the Pentagon has collapsed, according to the Associated Press. Also, according to the Associated Press, this morning, there is a report that General Richard Myers, the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that prior to the crash into the Pentagon, military officials had been notified that another hijacked plane had been heading from New York area to Washington. He said he assumed that the hijacked plane from New York to Washington was the one that hit the Pentagon. But again, you can see a portion of the Pentagon there has collapsed in that very dramatic picture.
Meanwhile, all government buildings in the District of Columbia, including the State Department and the White House, have been evacuated. As we've heard, all commercial traffic throughout the U.S. has been halted. Let's go to Cheryl Johnson, who is with Metro, who can tell us what these events, what kind of effect they've had on Metro trains and buses throughout our area. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning. So far, we have closed our Pentagon Metro station, which is, of course, nearest the Pentagon itself. And in addition to that, we're not sending trains across the Yellow Line Bridge. So we're using our buses to do what we call a bus bridge, or take people from L'Enfant Plaza Station to Pentagon City, because, again, we are not sending trains across the Yellow Line Bridge. And, of course, at the Pentagon Station, we're doing a bus bridge from Arlington Cemetery to Pentagon City.
Okay, so if you wanted to get to National Airport from the district, you'd take a bus from the Pentagon Station to, how does that work?
You would take a bus from either the L'Enfant Plaza Station to Pentagon City,
okay,
and then continue your commute, and that's the Yellow Line. Or if you're on the Blue Line, you would get off at Arlington Cemetery to catch a bus, and then you would go past the Pentagon Station by bus, and then get off at Pentagon City to continue your commute on the Blue Line to get to National Airport.
Okay, of course, once again, all airports across the country have been shut down by the FAA.
Well, if that's the case, then I'm sure people are attempting to just use the Metro to get to where they need to get to at this point, because I understand the federal government has released employees, and I can look out my window and see gridlock on the streets already, traffic gridlock.
I'm sure. Cheryl Johnson, thank you very much.
And listen, be aware that, it's very hard to get through on the phone, so if you call us and you're not able to get through, that's because so many of the circuits, both cell phones
Excuse me, Cheryl, just a moment. We're just getting a report from the Associated Press that a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department. We are just hearing this from the Associated Press, a car bomb exploding outside the State Department here in Washington. We have no details of that, but we'll bring them to you as they come in to us. Let's go back to Megan McGrath, who is near the Pentagon off Columbia Columbia Pike. Megan?
Yeah, if you take a look behind me, you can see in the last few minutes we've actually seen that section of the Pentagon where the explosion took place. It has actually collapsed in a rather large section. You can see that the smoke is still billowing from the area. We still are seeing some flames coming from inside the building, and the whole section has literally collapsed upon itself. That will give you an idea of just how tremendous this explosion was. Just to be able to do this kind of damage to such a secure building, it just really indicates how powerful this was. And again, we were driving by the area, and you felt kind of a tremor as you were driving by. You could feel a disturbance in the air, and then that's when we looked over, and that's when we saw the fireball and saw the damage that was done. Now we are being told by military officials to clear the area. There were a lot of people, a lot of folks in cars, a lot of employees from the Navy Annex who actually left their building, abandoned their cars in the street, and were up on this ridge taking a look at the damage and watching the rescue effort. All of those people are being cleared out of the area at this point. And that's really all we can tell you. But if you just take a look at the side of that building, it really is quite dramatic. And, of course, emergency crews are here on the scene trying to secure the situation. But at this point, they are evacuating everybody out of this area. Back to you.
Thank you, Megan. As we heard from Cheryl Johnson, there are massive traffic jams around as we continue to follow the impact of this here in Washington, D.C.
Apparently all federal employees have been released from their offices, and that is going to cause major problems. Once again, the latest news is that we have received word from the Associated Press that a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department. That, according to senior law enforcement officials quoted by the Associated Press. And now we're going to go to Jerry Edwards with Metro Traffic Control, and he can perhaps show us some other pictures and tell us what the effect on traffic is. Jerry?
Barbara and Joe, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Indeed, as the federal offices now are being released and people are leaving downtown, let me bring up a couple of the traffic cameras. We are looking at particularly tough traffic in many locations. We'll start over Northern Virginia on 395. This is outbound traffic. The left side of your screen, the camera's a little blurry. Outbound 395. Delays begin back at the 14th Street Bridge. You can see police have blocked off the exit, which would take you up toward the Pentagon for obvious reasons. So 395 now, coming out of downtown, is backing up. And again, there's no exit to the Pentagon, which is causing a lot of confusion. Route 110 is closed. Let's switch gears and show you the inbound side of the Roosevelt Bridge. I'm sorry, this is the outer loop at the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. No problems at the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, no accidents. It's all volume right now as people are leaving. This is, in essence, an afternoon rush hour we're dealing with, so be prepared for that. Here we are with another shot of traffic getting across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. If we get additional information, what we're being told now, of course, all the Potomac bridges, the Memorial, the Roosevelt, and, of course, traffic coming up the 14th Street Bridge is going to be diverted. 395 is closed at the exit for the Pentagon. Folks in Maryland don't have any problems right now. We've taken a few calls, people concerned about traffic in Maryland. That's not a problem right now. If we can go to V4 on the fly here, guys, and see the 14th Street Bridge. This is the inbound side, which kind of surprises us at this point, where 395 northbound to the inbound 14th Street Bridge is open. However, at this point, it appears that most of the traffic that would come off the Southeast-Southwest Freeway headed into downtown, of course, is going to be completely closed off. So, again, we will keep you updated. But what we're dealing with now, of course, is everyone's leaving downtown, headed outbound. So the inbound side is not as important as the outbound side. We're dealing with basically an afternoon rush hour, plus all the activity that's going on. Obviously, a very busy time. We are here, and we will keep you updated throughout all of this. Barbara and Joe, back to you.
Right,
Thanks
Jerry.
very much, Jerry. We're going to show you another picture of the Pentagon where we could see that the structure had collapsed upon itself right where the plane apparently hit, and now the Pentagon officials are evacuating everyone from the area there, according to the Associated Press, because they fear another plane could be en route to the Pentagon.
Senior law enforcement officials say a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department. That from the AP we're just getting. It was already among buildings here in the nation's capital that had been evacuated, so people had been asked to leave. They were leaving. We have just heard that the second tower has collapsed in New York City. The second World Trade Center tower has just collapsed in New York. We're looking at a live picture there. The first one collapsed about an hour ago now, and now the second apparently has done the same.
Well, this is not only devastating damage, it is devastating to look at this, but yes, the second tower has now collapsed. This after two separate plane crashes into one plane into each of the towers earlier this morning. There has been a rash of terrorist activity. Of course, a plane crashing into the Pentagon. Here we're looking at video now We're going to rejoin NBC coverage now. You can see it start to collapse.
That's a videotape replay.
We are back at 10:30 Eastern Time on this Tuesday morning, this horrific, incredible, not to be believed Tuesday morning. You are looking at live pictures of the World Trade Center where just a few minutes ago, within the last minute actually, the second Twin Tower collapsed. Just to recap, if you're just joining us, around 8:42 Eastern Time this morning here in New York City, a plane crashed into the right Twin Tower of the World Trade Center about 2/3 of the way up the building, leaving a huge gaping hole, a huge fire, and tons of billowing smoke. About 25 minutes later, a second jet, believed to be a 727 or a 737,
some reports of a 757 even,
then crashed in the second Twin Tower. The first plane, incidentally, was en route from Boston, Massachusetts to Los Angeles.
Here's the video, I think, of the second plane striking the tower.
That's right. We're not sure the origin of that plane, is my understanding. The first plane that caused that hole on the right-hand side in the other Twin Tower was from Boston to LAX to Los Angeles. It was Flight 11, American Airlines. We have confirmed that that plane was hijacked. What happened following the hijacking is unclear. We should note that about an hour after the first collision at the Pentagon, reportedly another plane crashed into the Pentagon, which is just outside Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. All air traffic has been stopped.
Government buildings have been evacuated, as have other buildings across the country. The Sears Tower in Chicago was evacuated. You can imagine that other buildings in major cities and small cities around the country are probably being evacuated as well.
There's an unconfirmed report of a car bomb at the State Department. We have not been able to pin that down. There is also, Jim Miklashevsky was told that there was an unconfirmed report of another air hijacking. We share this with you not in an attempt to in any way exacerbate what is already a terrible situation, but so much has come true today based on these early reports that we want you to have as much information as we can possibly get. At the Pentagon, all people outside were told to take cover just moments ago, but Jim Miklashevsky said the skies were clear.
There was an unconfirmed report of another hijacking with a plane headed towards Washington. Again, we don't want to sound alarmist,
right,
but that is something that Mick heard while he was at the Pentagon. We also want to mention that the president is en route from Longboat Key, Florida, where he was there to visit an elementary school to talk about literacy. Obviously, clearly, his agenda has changed dramatically. He will convene a meeting of the National Security Council as soon as he gets home. Colin Powell is also on his way back from Lima, Peru. He was scheduled to be in Bogota, Colombia.
And probably not at the White House. They'll probably take him to a safe location. There are a number of them, some in the hills of Virginia, as you know. And my guess is that Air Force One is in the unusual situation of having a fighter plane escort on its way back from Florida today. That's where we stand.
Think about the loss of life that we could have seen this morning. If you think about the fact that when full, the World Trade Centers hold about 50,000 people, no telling how many people were at work before 9 o'clock this morning and then shortly after 9 o'clock in the other tower. But if you look at this picture here, Tom and Katie, at Lower Manhattan, it appears that terrorists have succeeded this time in doing what terrorists tried to do back in 1993.
This is war. This is a declaration and an execution of an attack on the United States, two of our most conspicuous symbols of the American system of capitalism. The Pentagon, which of course is the headquarters of the most mighty military in the world, was attacked today as well. The White House has been evacuated. The State Department has been evacuated. Financial markets have been immobilized. All flights taking off after these attacks were grounded.
International flights have been sent to Canada.
It turns out it's transatlantic flights only going to Canada now. So there has been great chaos visited upon this country, to say nothing, as you pointed out, Matt, so importantly, of the still untold loss of life, and it's going to be horrendous. We don't know yet what the exact numbers are, but we can only tell you by looking at those pictures that you can guess as well as that we can. that there are going to be a lot of people who are not going to be able to escape that.
Back in 1993, when the bomb blew up in the basement of the World Trade Center, so many survivors talked about how long it took them, with no power in the elevators, to walk down the smoke-filled stairways. And you think about how many people were still trying to escape those buildings when first one and then the second tower collapsed.
And of course, the triage unit that has been set up, area hospitals are all receiving victims. And as Matt said, 50,000 capacity when everybody is in the building. But many people at 8:42 a.m. here in New York are at their desks, working in their offices. One young man or one man was reached by phone and was asked what is happening there, and he said, "We are blanking, dying here."
Not to
and there was
mention,
screaming and yelling and pure chaos, understandably, going on in the background.
There's a picture of Lower Manhattan, ladies and gentlemen, the most important city in the world in so many ways. And now it has been attacked by terrorists at the World Trade Center, and the damage is beyond our ability to tell you in great detail.
Let me mention that,
I was going to say, here's what the president said. He canceled an education appearance in Florida. Here's what he said just a short time ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. I, unfortunately, will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary of Rod Page and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence.
That was George W. Bush about an hour ago, speaking from Longboat Key, Florida. He is en route to Washington, D.C. We're looking at some pictures on the ground, or we were, of apparently some of the victims. He is on the ground.
Quite extraordinary. These are the emergency workers who are coming back. It was just about 10 minutes ago that we described to you the possibility of that North Tower collapsing. About 5 minutes after we went off the air, it did collapse. Once again, we have no idea at this point the loss of life. I can only tell you there were hundreds of emergency workers down there, about 5 or 6 blocks. It took probably about, I would say, no more than 50 or 60 seconds for that dust cloud, dust and smoke, to literally make it the 5 or 6 blocks up here and begin to envelop us, at which point we started to move out of the way. There were literally dozens and dozens of firemen who were trying to run past us. In fact, our cameraman even put one of the captains in his car and drove him down to a command post. The people who you see here are pretty much all emergency workers. Many of them that I have seen in the last 2 to 3 minutes, quite frankly, are coming out of here. And remember this, these are professionals. They're coming out of there looking literally stunned, in shock, many of them, struggling for breath, obviously in serious distress. Breathing problems are the biggest problem for those who manage to make it safely out of that area down below us. You can't see much more than a block south of me right now, and the World Trade Center probably stands about 10 blocks south of where I am at this moment. And as you can see now, the dust is beginning to pick up here. It really depends on which way the wind blows as to whether or not we get heavy dust or not. But at this point, I can tell you that in the first few minutes, emergency workers were trying just basically to get out of there, to survive. You could see that written in their faces. The situation was so desperate, they just wanted to get out of there. Now, many of them are beginning to regroup. A couple of them asked me where their commander might be. They're trying to get together and go back in there and try to take care of the people who obviously are in serious trouble. There's no other way to describe it. The language here, at times, if I slip into language which seems a little melodramatic, forgive me, but this is a circumstance which is very, very difficult to describe in many ways without sounding melodramatic. Certainly in more than 20 years of of covering horrific events, this is something that I've never seen before. As we say, the emergency workers now beginning to try to gather themselves. Over there you can see a police emergency service unit. They're trying basically now to reestablish some kind of a safe perimeter. And many of the emergency workers basically just happy to be alive. Certainly that picture tells it all. Many of them just happy to be alive at this point, having survived what is an extraordinary event, the collapse of 2 towers. As we said earlier in our report, 110 stories each. I will tell you that what I saw fall had to be at least 40, 50 stories of that building at first. The skeleton was left at about, I would say, the 50 or 60th floor after the shell, after the structure of the building fell down. The skeleton, the steel skeleton, was literally sheaved off, and it took probably about another 30 seconds before the skeleton collapsed into the street. That was the last we saw of the World Trade Center, and that was maybe 10 minutes ago when that final skeleton, the metal skeleton, steel skeleton, collapsed into the street.
That was NBC's Pat Dawson again. He's standing about 10 blocks from where the World Trade Center towers used to stand. You're looking at the collapse of one of those towers right now. We now have an AP News alert out of Pittsburgh. Officials at Somerset County Airport are confirming the crash of a large plane just north of the airport. That's about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Again, officials at Somerset County Airport confirm the crash of a large plane north of that airport, which is located about 80 miles to the southeast of the city of Pittsburgh. We do not know whether that crash of that plane is related to what has become an obvious terrorist attack both here in New York City and in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon.
Matt, we just got a late word that State Department security officials are denying those reports of a car bomb at the State Department. Betsy Stewart is at the C Street entrance and also says there's no sign of a car bomb. Betsy Stewart is one of our producers who's very familiar with the State Department. The building has been evacuated. Top officials are still believed to be in the operations center, however. Those are highly secured areas in terms of penetration physically and otherwise. Colin Powell, as Andrea reported earlier, was headed for Lima, Peru, but he's done a U-turn and he's coming back. The president is on his way back. He'll have a National Security Council meeting, we think probably at around 11:30 or perhaps around noon. That is likely to take place either at Andrews Air Force Base or in some more secure location. The White House has been evacuated, especially with this report of another plane going down, this time in the Pittsburgh area. There were planes in the air when the order went out that there would be no more takeoffs, so we don't know how much more damage these terrorists had in mind.
Let's go to Bob Hager, who is, of course, NBC's aviation expert. Bob, what kind of information are you getting from your sources?
Not a lot, Katie, from the FAA. For instance, they are not talking about any possible hijacks. And normally they can tell when there's a hijack in progress because the pilot, the original pilot of the plane, has various buttons that he can push that set off a code and tell them that there were hijacks. But maybe as a matter of security, they're not saying anything about that. They did stop all takeoffs in the U.S. at 9:25 this morning, and then for pilots that were in the air, the question came up what to do about them, and they were given some discretion to continue on to their destination, so long as it was not the New York or Washington area, or divert to an airport if that's what they wanted to do. I saw the blast at the Pentagon, not the blast take place, but moments after it. I'd been at National Airport trying to get up to New York, and you could see that smoke billowing out of the Pentagon. I can give you a little description of what it's like on the streets of Washington, because it was quite crowded trying to work my way back here to NBC. They have now given not only the White House and those key buildings like the U.S. Capitol, but at this point they've given all federal employees the word to leave their offices and get home.
Right.
So there are traffic jams in Washington.
Okay, Bob, I'm sure you're going to get more information for us momentarily, but first we want to go to Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon, who has some more information. Mick?
Katie, they're still clearing people away from the Pentagon. Still, security forces believe that there may be another incoming plane headed in the Washington region. But there was a very telling, dramatic moment just a second ago when a U.S. Air Force F-16 flew very low level, did a wide sweeping turn around the Pentagon and back over Washington. And as one Air Force officer standing near me said, "My God, they're now flying air cover over Washington." A very dramatic moment, a milestone in what Tom has already described as a declaration of war. terrorist war against the U.S.
Let's go back and show you the pictures of Lower Manhattan, where the situation only gets worse, not better. That is the financial district of the world. It's also a residential area and a great commercial area. Both Twin Trade Tower buildings now have collapsed onto the ground. There is an untold loss of life. The ripple effect goes on with all the smoke and dust that is spread out across that very densely populated area. It goes down below ground as well as in the high-rise buildings there. There are many residential structures in that area as well. Some heroic rescue workers were down there trying to get people out of the building when the first building came down, and then the second building did as well. Without any sound and looking at this, there is a kind of a surreal quality. But that is the epicenter of a great, great national tragedy and a great loss of life. No question about it this morning.
We're talking about people who were hurt, perhaps killed in this blast. Many of them have been brought to area hospitals, including St. Vincent's Hospital. Bob Bazell is there. Bob, what's the latest?
Well, Katie, ambulances continue to stream in. Several New York City streets have been closed. Major avenues have been closed off so that ambulances can continue to come in. In addition, the New York City subway system has now been closed down, and several buildings that were not involved in the World Trade Center area have been shut down, and people have been told to go home. But a lot of them are just wandering aimlessly on the street. Many people openly weeping and hugging each other. This is clearly is a time that, as Tom described, is very close to the beginning of a war. And but the casualties do keep coming in: burns, smoke inhalation, very severe, and again. All the medical people that I've talked to say this is just the tip of the iceberg. We expect casualties to be coming in all through the night and way into tomorrow and beyond.
Bob, if you could just stand by for a moment, because we have this report from AP that I'm just simply going to read. A large plane crashed Tuesday morning just north of the Somerset County Airport, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Airport officials said the plane, believed to be a Boeing 767, crashed around 10 a.m. about 8 miles east of Jennerstown. According to County 911 dispatchers, WPXI-TV reported. The crash came the same morning that terrorists crashed two planes into the World Trade Center in New York City, and the twin 110-story towers collapsed. Explosions also rocked the Pentagon and the State Department, although that was refuted moments ago, and spread fear across the nation. There was no other immediate details on the Pennsylvania crash, and it was not clear whether the crash was related to the others. Again, that was a report, a bulletin that was just issued by the Associated Press.
You know what is so stunning about all of this, Matt and Katie, is that there has been no indication whatsoever that this very carefully coordinated massive attack was going to occur. There's been a complete intelligence failure here. And there will be, obviously, down the road, a price to pay for that.
Well, that's actually not all that surprising, Tom, because we've often talked in the past following every terrorist event about how vulnerable the United States is, and many terrorist experts say how unprepared they are. And the question, of course, is, can you ever prepare for an attack like this?
Well, that's true, but we also have people out there who are enlisting posts, and we've penetrated these kinds of organizations, but to have this kind of an attack, this sophisticated, this efficient, striking at the heart of the nation's capital, striking at the heart of New York City, now, and if this is true that this plane went down as a result of this attack, we don't know whether it's the end of it. Right. This is a massively well-coordinated attack of some kind that is nothing short but of a declaration of war on this country.
And terrorist experts are now saying, and intelligence experts are now saying, that there are a very short or very few number of terrorist groups that are capable of this kind of planning, and a couple of names come to mind, and I'm not going to throw them out now because we certainly don't have any reports. Before I go to Jamie Gangel, I just want to say that some of the descriptions coming from eyewitnesses in Lower Manhattan of these explosions occurring are chilling. One man talked about getting off a PATH train, that's a subway train, here in Lower Manhattan, and looking up at the building after the first explosion and seeing people jump out of the windows. We have no idea how high up, but hearing people on the ground scream each time another person jumped out of a window attempting to get to safety. And then when the second explosion occurred, he felt the heat of the explosion on the back of his neck. Jamie Gangel is our national correspondent. She's joining us now on the phone. Jamie?
Matt, you know, speaking of those intelligence officials that you were just mentioning, now finally we can no longer reach on the phone anyone at the CIA. Apparently the CIA has been evacuated. We know the National Security Agency, which is the electronic eavesdropping agency, which is south of Baltimore near Fort Meade, Maryland, that they have been shut down. What we're hearing from both places is that all non-essential personnel have been told to leave. And I can only imagine that probably they are trying to move some of their operations out of those buildings as well for backup procedure. But in addition to whatever intelligence was or was missed in all of this, we now have perhaps some problems gathering intelligence as those buildings are now being shut down.
Right, Jamie, thank you very much. Tom, let's go back and talk about something you mentioned a second ago that is just, it shows the enormity of this situation in addition to what we assume will be horrendous loss of life. All planes in this country have been grounded. I mean, you think about the impact that has, and I mean, is there ever a time we can imagine something like that ever happening before?
The most powerful nation in the world, and national security officials and terrorist experts have been saying for some time, a small band of very willful and sophisticated people can bring us to a halt, and they have done just that. There's a psychological terror as a result of all of this, as you can only imagine how it plays out across the country today. People looking in who don't live in New York or live in the nation's capital are wondering what happens around me. It is hard to overstate the consequences of all of this, and this is just the beginning. We'll be living with this story and dealing with the consequences of it for some time. The United States will change as a result of all of this. We already thought that there was a lot of security in America at the airports and so on, and yet there was a successful hijacking at Boston Airport today, and the consequences of that we're seeing on the screen here this morning. So this is going to change this country profoundly in not just the coming days, but the coming months, to say nothing, as you have been saying, Matt, of the horrific loss of life that we're witnessing.
On that subject, you know, and Katie and Tom, to complete a thought I started before, you both were out at the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, a much smaller building, and it took rescue workers more than a week to find all the people trapped in that wreckage. We have a building here two buildings of each 110 stories. It's mind-boggling to think of what it's going to take over these next days and weeks to find survivors or victims of these explosions.
And of course, it continues to be a terrifying situation because there are a number of planes up in the air as this took place, and a number of unconfirmed and frightening reports about those planes that we heard earlier from Jim Miklashevsky, that somebody had gotten word at the Pentagon that perhaps there is another plane, whether they were talking about the one north of Pittsburgh or it's completely unclear. And it's also unclear whether these planes that were en route to a destination have been grounded themselves. In other words, that there were emergency landings or what. I think it's very difficult to get any communication with airports all across the country because they're, I'm sure, completely chaotic.
Katie, you know from your time in Oklahoma City and all the time that you spent with the victims there, the psychological effect of all of this on this country and how it's going to affect our whole sense of security and, in a way, our sense of innocence about this is Fortress America. It couldn't happen here. We said that about the Murrah Federal Building. We even said it about Columbine High School. This is an incident of a whole different magnitude.
I have to say, I've never, ever, witnessed anything quite as horrific. I hate to keep saying it because we have seen these types of things play out in movies and, you know, in worst case scenarios and in dramatic renditions of this kind of incident, but certainly no one has ever seen this kind of thing unfold. And it is really shocking. We
want to go now on the phone. We have Neil Livingston, who is an expert on terrorism. Mr. Livingston, can you hear me?
I can.
You know, we were talking about what it would take in terms of planning and coordination to pull off an attack like this with so many prongs. At least 2 attacks here in New York City, 1 in Washington, D.C. We don't know if the crash of that plane outside Pittsburgh is related, but give me an idea of how many groups there are in the country that would be capable of something like this.
Well, there are very few groups in the world capable of this kind of action. And you have to remember also that we have the people who hijacked these planes were going to a certain death as well. So they were suicide bombers, in effect. And that probably suggests that this was not something like the Medellin cartel or one of the other groups that has the financial wherewithal and the infrastructure to carry out coordinated attacks.
Yeah, I know.
I think that obviously the finger of suspicion, and we're always very cautious about pointing that in any particular direction, but we have to look to the Middle East. We have to look to Osama bin Laden. we have to look at some Palestinian groups right now.
But even in the past, when we were talking about Osama bin Laden and his group, there have been intelligence experts who've picked up conversations, transmissions that occurred before an attack to give some kind of indication, even if we didn't understand them till after the attack. Is it unusual that with so many prongs to an attack that there wouldn't have been some type of warning through intelligence sources?
Well, it's a myth that we always know that these things are coming down. Part of our problem is, and we just had a warning go out to our embassies and military bases in the Far East. That could have been a feint. That could have been a diversion. We have so many warnings these days that people, they tend to fade into the background noise unless we have real specific information about an upcoming attack. Generally, we don't take action. And these groups are very hard to penetrate. They're focused with bonds of kinship and people who have known each other for years. So it doesn't surprise me that we didn't know that this was coming.
All right. Mr. Livingston, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Benjamin Levy is at the scene near the World Trade Center. Actually, he's going to tell us precisely where he is and what he saw. Benjamin, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, Benjamin?
Yes?
Hi, it's Katie Couric. Can you tell me where you are and what you have seen or what you are seeing?
Well, right now I'm in Lower Manhattan, but I was working, I work at the Federal Building behind City Hall. And we were just sitting at our desks about 9 a.m. this morning. We heard a big explosion. Then about 5 minutes or maybe 10 minutes later, we saw the other plane hit the building, the second tower, and then we just evacuated. And as we started to walk away, we turned around about maybe 15 minutes after we left the building, and the second tower just disappeared from sight. And I tell you, I've never seen anything more horrible in my entire life.
Did you see any people, any casualties, Mr. Levy?
We we bumped into a guy from Tower 1 who said that he had a chance to get out of the building after the plane hit the first one. He had a chance to get out of the second one, but he said that people were jumping out of the windows to get away from the fire.
Where are you now, Benjamin?
I'm in a hair salon in Lower Manhattan, talking to you guys.
Well, obviously, that was...
And was the whole Federal Building evacuated, Mr. Levy?
Yeah, well, we started running out of the building as soon as we saw the second explosion. And then I work on the 22nd floor, and as soon as we were down at the bottom, they sounded the alarm, and then they announced evacuation, but most of us were already out.
How far physically are you actually from the World Trade Center?
Right now, or where?
No, when this happened.
About 6 blocks away.
6 blocks away. And you were able to get out pretty easily, and there were no kind of electrical problems in your building as a result of the impact of the fire or anything like that?
No, we got out pretty good, thank God.
And as that whole area down there, the City Hall, the Federal Building, and all the other commercial buildings, they've all been evacuated as well?
Well, yeah, as we were leaving, the police were telling all the shop owners to shut their shops and go home.
And that must be enveloped by the smoke and dust and everything that we see now, because that covers the entire lower end of Manhattan, which is a considerably large area, not only physically, but in terms of the financial networks, the commerce that is done there, a lot of residential areas.
Yeah, you could smell the smoke. And you could smell it, but it wasn't. We were walking away from it.
Benjamin Levy. Benjamin, thanks so much for talking with us. We appreciate it, and we're glad you're safe.
Katie, I've got just a little rundown here, if I can, Matt, for just a moment about what's going on around the country. The State Department officials have been moved into the State Department Training Center in Arlington, Virginia. The state has been evacuated, obviously. In Minneapolis, St. Paul International Airport shut down. The IDS Center in downtown Minneapolis, tallest building, evacuated. Georgia, all flights at Hartsfield Atlanta International Airport closed. The CNN Center, world headquarters of Cable News Network, was closed to the public. In Maryland, officials are tightening security throughout the state. Of course, that's the home of Andrews Air Force Base. Navy installations throughout the Hampton Roads, home to the world's largest Navy base, have been placed under increased security. In Pennsylvania, Philadelphia International Airport has been closed, and of course the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall are being closed as well.
In fact, all national monuments, Tom, I believe, have been evacuated and closed.
And California, the state has been put on the highest alert. They're on tactical alert in Los Angeles. The Department of Energy's Nuclear Weapons and Research Complex in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, put under heightened security.
It is now coming up on 10:59 East Coast time. We'll give you a recap of what we've seen so far in just a moment. Just a quick note from one of the hospitals downtown in New York City. where they say that hundreds of people have been burned from head to toe. This is from Dr. Stephen Stern at St. Vincent's Hospital in Greenwich Village. About 50 or 60 doctors and nurses standing by in scrubs. The entire entrance to the emergency room was lined with stretchers covered with white sheets. Doctors said the victims mostly had burns.
Of course, they're being treated in a number of area hospitals, including St. Vincent's, NYU. Downtown is just about 5 minutes away. As a spokesperson told us earlier, they've had a lot of experience dealing with problems at the World Trade Center from that February terrorist bombing in 1993. And obviously, they have all been mobilized, and emergency crews are working feverishly outside the World Trade Center.